All right, thank you everybody for coming here tonight. For those of you who don't know me, Alex Torpy, Village President. I'm going to step aside for a minute and let kind of our panel here answer your questions. Obviously, issues about the water quality in South Orange has not been a recent issue. It's something we've been dealing with for a number of years, and that we've been in litigation with East Orange Water Commission about this. It's something that the village has taken very seriously since day one. And the goal of this meeting is to make sure that anybody who wants information about what's happening with the water, with East Orange Water Commission, with the water quality, we want to make sure to assure people of the water quality currently. We want to make sure to be able to answer any questions people might have about the water. It's important, it's really important to all of us here in the village that every member of the public has accurate, up-to-date information about what's happening. Make sure there aren't questions that are going unanswered. I think the village administrator, Mr. Lewis, and myself, our attorney, and other trustees have all been very responsive to members of the public who do want more information. We thought tonight the best way to continue to do that was to organize this and have a couple folks come here and answer any questions. So anybody here might be familiar already with our counsel here in the village, Steve Rother, so have Karen Fell from the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection, as well as Matt Maffei from the Department of Environmental Protection. And they're here to answer any questions that you have. And so without any further ado, I'd like to open it up to Mr. Rother and just let things get started.
Okay. I'm going to sort of MC this tonight, and as a preliminary comment, I'd like to say that the public is welcome to ask any questions regarding water quality. What we don't want to do tonight is to engage in lengthy questions about the status of the litigation, and the DEP representatives here tonight are not here to answer questions regarding the litigation. I'd like to tell you, though, that the village has made significant progress with the appointment of a special master by the court in the litigation. And in the course of proceedings before the special master, lots of progress has been made, and we now have concession on the part of East Orange Water Commission to take steps immediately to address an engineered solution for VOCs in the water, and to actively pursue an engineered solution on a permanent basis to be included at their finishing plant, which will treat all of the water that comes into the system. We've put on the website a release which describes in some considerable detail the progress we've made with the special master, and we continue to meet with him on a regular basis. It's almost every week, certainly no less than every other week, and the special master is holding East Orange to all of the commitments that they're making with regard to these engineered solutions. So without any further ado, we would like to invite you up to the podium to address any questions that you may have with regard to the quality of water. I would ask that you make these questions concise, and please don't repeat questions. If you've heard the question once before, we don't need to hear it a second time unless there's some further clarification that you need. Someone want to step up? Please do. Oh, and name and address, please.
Yeah, my name is David Rubin. I live at 341 Scotland
Could you pull that mic a little closer to you?
Sorry. David Rubin, 341 Scotland Road, South Orange. If you could just summarize what the sources are in terms of what the contravention of the drinking water standards are, and whether those sources are currently being used or they're offline. Are we talking about municipal wells or surface water? And what the plan is as far as mitigation or remediation of the groundwater, just so we can all sort of be on the same page in terms of what the problem is. Is it currently in the water system, or is that source or sources offline, and what the plan is for remediation? Thank you.
Okay, well, I think I won't go into the litigation part, but So the issue is that the issue that we're focused on right now is that there's a contaminant referred to as PCE, tetrachloroethylene, and that is found. It's found in the groundwater in this area. It's found in the groundwater in Orange. nationwide, it's a very common solvent, and it's found in a lot of places in groundwater. South Orange gets its water from one well that they pump and treat, which is called well 17, and that well also has PCE in it, and that well has been treated for many years to non-detect levels.
Where's that well located?
I don't remember.
In Grove Park. It's located in Grove Park.
Grove Park. And so South Orange gets about 15%, maybe a little bit less, of its water from that well. In addition, South Orange gets a pretty big chunk of their water from East Orange. East Orange has a significant number of wells in, I think it's 4 different clusters of wells. That is 18 to 22 wells total, and many of those wells also have PCE in them.
Where are they located?
They are located in Florham Park, Milburn, Livingston. They're I think it's called the East Orange Preserve. Those wells have levels of PCE. Some don't have levels of PCE from the samples that we've seen so far, and some do. And most of the levels are in the lowish numbers around the MCL. But all those wells go to one common place, which is referred to as WORPS, WORPS, which is like the White Oak treatment plant, basically. Those wells are not, PCE is a type of volatile organic compound, and those wells, the water from those wells is disinfected, which is appropriate and necessary, but they aren't treated for PCE. So that means that levels of PCE are frequently found coming from those wells, and the levels vary depending on which wells are being pumped. And so the levels range from anywhere from very close to the detection limit, say about 0.5 or 1/2 of a part per billion, up to 1.5, 1.8 part per billion. And there was one time back in 2011 when there was an elevated level of 3 parts per billion. The drinking water standard in New Jersey is 1 part per billion. So it's around, but sometimes over a little bit, sometimes under a little bit, the drinking water standard. And that's really the crux of the issue is that they have to provide treatment. And that's what we have been wrestling with for this past time, to get them to come to the table and put treatment on. And so they are willing to do that. And then we are in fact meeting with them shortly, and they will be presenting a plan to put treatment on.
How long has this condition been in existence because of what's been fed to the South Orange wells?
There's been elevated levels for many years. I mean, going back to at least the 90s. Not elevated, there's been detections of PCE. Well, exceeding the drinking water standard, the one time that was, basically they haven't, and that's part of the issue is that they haven't. Now,
They have to sample what, quarterly, annually? Or?
they have to sample quarterly because they're over the detection limit. So they have to sample quarterly, and they've, for many, many years, been just under the level.
Just we're getting a sign. President, when you have a question,
Yeah. Let's not continue a conversation, all right?
No, you can say it.
Yep.
As many questions as you want. Just do it at the microphone. It doesn't pick up on video.
Okay, Karen, maybe you should clarify, and for those who are watching at home, the question was whether there was a detect or not, and Karen, I think you said that there was not a detect.
No, I think that the issue was that
An exceedance.
an exceedance of the MCL. So for all of these years, they even though individual wells vary, the sample that they take is just after all the wells are combined and it leaves the treatment plant. So that is the compliance point, and all these years that's been just under the value that would cause it to be a violation. And then recently in 2011, they had a value that was a little bit higher, and once we had put them on monthly sampling, and that put them over the limit. And really the issue is that the wells themselves range from a couple parts, from less than 1 part per billion to more than 1 part per billion, and in fact, there's one well that is now a little bit even higher than that. So we are looking to them to provide what we keep referring to as an engineered solution, which is really going to involve treatment, because the levels vary over time in the wells, so they can't predict that one specific well is always going to run at 1 part per billion and that one's always going to run at 0.5. So really, treatment is where they need to go.
And treatment is what they've agreed to do now, and that's coming out of the meetings with the special master and are going to be in a form that we can enforce. Anyone else want to step up?
Stephen Schnall, Hartford Road. My question has to do, you say the wells vary. My question is, do we know the sources of these contaminants? And if so, is it related to other variables? Is it after a storm? Are they leaching from the ground, from chemicals nearby? But if we knew that, can we control it?
Well, that's a very good question. And if we knew that, no, we don't know what the source is. If we knew what the source was, my past experience has been, then the strategy would be to control it at the source of the contamination. And in addition, treatment of the wells would probably be necessary, because it would take a while for it to, even if you could stop it at the source of the contamination, it would take a while for it to go away. But there's not a known source for this yet. I mean, it's, the Orange Valley area was just named a Superfund site, not this area, but the valley across the way. So PCE is widespread in our country, a ubiquitous solvent over the years.
And it's found in many locations in
New Jersey. It's found in New Jersey,
groundwater.
it's found in New York, it's found, it's relative of the solvents, it's a pretty common solvent to be found in the, people in the past had dry wells that they threw stuff in. It was state of the art to throw stuff out the back door 50 years ago, I mean, so it's gotten into the groundwater, and it takes a really long time for it to be exhausted.
Tonya Moore, 9 East Clark Place. I have 2 quick questions. I'm not a scientist at all, and someone told me that there's a lot of danger in breathing this water, like when you're in the shower, and I'm wondering if that's true.
So here's the issue. When we were here a year and a half, 2 years ago, around there, and I think that we did not communicate the issue of showering very well. So I've gone back and spoken to our toxicology risk assessment people, and the risk is very, very, very low from drinking or showering. So, the levels here are a little bit, depending on which wells are pumping, and how much they're pumping. Sometimes they're a little above the MCL, sometimes they're a little below the MCL, but the values that they're a little above are not issues that warrant a risk from showering, and I think that we did not communicate that well last time.
My other question is just about, what about the damage that might have already been done? Is the town looking to see, for at least 3 years we've been experiencing this water. How do you figure out what this has done to people?
Well, I'd just like to speak to that, not in terms of the litigation issue, but in terms of the health issue. The MCL, which is the maximum contaminant level, is set at a very, very conservative value. And by conservative, I mean that there's very little risk from drinking it. The number is set such that about over the course of a lifetime, a million people drinking it over 2 liters a day over the course of a lifetime, so around 70 years, with 1 million people drinking it, 2 of those people would get cancer from it. That's how low the risk is. The risk is high enough that we've made a decision that this is how we do risk, and if you exceed it, you have to put on treatment. So I don't want to I don't want to minimize the fact that they have to put on treatment. We are now working more optimistic that we're working towards putting on treatment. So, but the thing is that the level is set at a really, really stringent level. So the fact that it's been over a little bit is still a very, very low risk. And I know it's easy to get, upset about it because it's hard to understand, but it's set at a really cautious level, and it's not,
And that incidence is over a period of 70
of 70 years. So it's not like
Not
one
every
person a year.
It's over the course of 70 years.
Right. If you put, the way that they extrapolate the studies, it's like if you put 1 million people in a room and everybody drank 2 liters a day at that level, over the course of that 70-year period, one person would have cancer that would be subscribed, to that source.
How you doing? Michael Mayer, Sherman Place. When did South Orange switch to using East Orange Water Commission? We always had a different, weren't we getting our water from a different source before?
We were initially getting our water from our own wells, which had the contamination problem at a level which would have required the installation of a lot of strippers, and the option was to go to East Orange back in the 80s. What year was it? 1995.
1995. So we had our own. Was that in the recycling area? Was that the
They were along the
there?
river. They were along the river.
Okay. And so is that an option to, rather than having, dealing with East Orange, is there another water source that we
Yeah.
cannot deal with?
The options, and we're really not here tonight to talk about, but we have studied, the village has been studying the options, and there are very few. You've got to buy water from a supplier who has a connection nearby. Otherwise, you're spending many millions of dollars building water mains to some distant supplier. There's only one other supplier that has an interconnection that's available to South Orange, and we are speaking with them.
So there's theoretically another option then, is that what you're saying?
There is an option that
Okay.
we are speaking with.
So I've been here for over 20 years. I mean, so my exposure and my kids' exposure to this water, I shouldn't lose any sleep over.
No, you shouldn't, but I don't want to, we're pushing to East Orange to treatment. East Orange is going to have to spend a significant amount of dollars, so it's very serious business, but when you look at the risk on an individual level, it's very, very, very low. Literally, I'm drinking the water now, and I'm doing that for a purpose, to say, the risk is very, very low.
Okay, thanks.
Anyone else?
I have a quick one. Tom Calvin. Can you tell us a little bit about what the treatment is and what you expect the levels to get down to after the treatment is in place?
Right, there's
By the way, you're only drinking it for 20 minutes. We're drinking it for like 20 years.
I know, but I drink, I know, but yeah, all right. So there's very tried and true treatment options, and the two most common would be either what's called GAC, granular activated carbon, and that's carbon, and the water filters through that, and as you can imagine, carbon like charcoal would, the contaminants at a microscopic level would adhere to the carbon, and then every so often, whether it's yearly or some frequency, the carbon gets replaced and a new unit gets brought in. So that's a very common treatment. Another possible treatment, or another likely treatment, is called air stripping, where water, basically the water goes down and down a tower, and air is bubbled up and it volatilizes the water out. And then that treatment usually gets it down to non-detectable levels. So it would be, the laboratory would end up reporting that it's not detected. at whatever the detection limit is, and the detection limit would be well below the maximum contaminant level.
And as a matter of fact, well 17, the Grove Park well is being treated with a stripper of that sort to a level of non-detect. And when you go to the recycling center, you can see that large tower over there. That's the airstrip. Yep.
Hi, my name is Megan Mary. I'm new to the community. I guess I have two quick questions. I kind of respect the boundaries of what tonight's meeting is about. It's about asking the DEP questions. A quick question for you, Mr. Rother. When is the town going to have a meeting where different options can go for going forward are going to be reviewed and the public can have a chance to weigh in on these options?
Well, the immediate options are the options for treatment by East Orange Water Commission, which are subject to review and approval by DEP, and which are the subject of discussion with the special master. Longer-term options are a bit more difficult to deal with. And are being analyzed from a variety of perspectives, cost perspectives, et cetera. And those, of course, are looked to as you get closer to the end of the contract term, which is approximately 3.5 years, three and a half years out.
And when does that contract expire?
In about 3.5 years.
So how long was the overall contract?
It had, was it 20 years?
It was 20 years, so sometime in the next year and a half to 2 years possibly?
Well, we are looking at the options right now. We are exploring those.
Okay.
And there are varieties, and one of the things that you should know is that it's not so simple, because East Orange Water, back up, at one time South Orange had its own water department. We had our own wells, we had our own distribution system, we operated the system, we maintained it. When we brought East Orange Water into this picture, what happened was we retained ownership of the system, we bought water from East Orange, and they maintained the system. So in the process of looking at other options, the whole system has to be looked at in terms of who's going to maintain it, who's going to be doing the billing. There are a whole series of issues. They have financial implications, and all those things have to be looked at and assessed, and that's in the process.
I assume that there'll be a period of public review for people who actually pay their water bills to be able to look at the results of your research.
Oh, at some point, absolutely. At some point when something's going to be recommended, absolutely, the options will be presented here.
Because as a
Fully.
newcomer to this community, one of the things that I've been blindsided by is my experience of what is felt to me, rightly or wrongly, like a lack of transparency about the process in terms of whether it's delayed communication or what have you. So I look forward to having that impression.
Part of the problem is that until now, we've been actively engaged in a litigation which doesn't allow for open discussion. I mean, we can't come to the residents and have a discussion of issues that involve tactics and other matters. Now that East Orange Water has essentially acknowledged that there is a problem and they want to do something, we are much more able to convey to the public what is happening. And that's what happened recently on the website. We put a release on the website to indicate to you what in fact has happened with the special master, because we're beyond that point now where we're actively disputing liability in this case. They've acknowledged that there is liability.
Okay, well, like I said, I look forward to kind of more of an experience of transparency and participation, either in understanding the process or you know, having a voice in something so fundamental as a water contract, you know. My questions for you folks from the DEP, and I'm so sorry if you addressed this, I got here a couple minutes late. I don't understand in terms of bacteria, if you could, because I've heard that there have been periods of elevated bacteria, and I know that that's really common even in properly functioning water systems, I mean, all systems through weather occurrences or whatnot experience fluctuations in bacteria level, and I just don't know how that works around here. You know, say after a storm, is water tested more frequently to anticipate that?
Right, the way, there's federal requirements for public water systems, which East Orange is and South Orange is, to do periodic testing of their water supply, and it's a function of the population served. So, and it's typically done on a certain number each week is how the larger systems do it. They don't go out after a storm necessarily and do it, you know, they just do it on a routine basis. So the bacteria, and you're right, I mean, bacteria is all around us. It's sometimes found a little bit in the water system. I just looked at South Orange's coliform results last night, and they've had all negatives except for, I think that they had one positive a couple of years ago. So the South Orange system has not had anything of note. The East Orange system had some E. coli detections about the time of Hurricane Irene, shortly after that, and they evaluated all of what it could be. It ended up concluding that it might be related to the way their sampling stations were constructed, you know, how wet it had been during Tropical Storm or Irene and then Lee and all that. Subsequent results have shown up fine. Results after that showed up fine, and we made them look at a variety of possibilities for what could be the cause, and nothing was found, and there haven't been problems since then. So it's common for, I mean, most water systems find detections of bacteria at times during their sampling.
On that point, though, isn't it true that it's more likely to have bacterial problems with surface water, in other words, reservoir water, as opposed to well water?
Oh, no, it's not?
Well, it depends. Go ahead.
I'll take that one, thank you. The issue of microbiological contamination can stem from the source water, but it can also stem from distribution upsets or treatment upsets. So just because the source water is one thing doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have a higher potential for microbiological detection. If you lose any part of compromise in the source water quality, or you lose a compromise in how it's distributed or treated, that's where you can have your introduction of contamination. Just to give you a little more detail on the microbiological testing, since you asked the question, for East Orange, the minimum requirement based on a population served is 80 samples per month. So they're generating that many samples to characterize the water quality in the distribution system. I just went back for a period of 1 year, March of 2012 through March of 2013. There had no violations of any standard. They had a hit of a bacteriological presence, unconfirmed. So the requirement is when you get a presence detected in routine monitoring, you have to go back and do confirmation or repeat samples, and they were all negative. So that's East Orange on microbiological. For South Orange, the monthly minimum requirement is 15 samples, and they routinely generate in the 20s. So they take more than the minimum. And in this case, there's been no hits at all
In the past year.
in the past year.
Yeah.
I'm speaking purely hypothetically because I'm trying to orient myself to this area. In the event that a repeat test showed an elevated level of bacteria, does the NJDEP have its own protocol for notifying populations about the elevated bacteria? How does that work?
Good.
Okay, so the issue of that is when it's confirmed violation, there are federal regulations that govern public notifications. And so the DEP's role and responsibility is to ensure that the water system executes that task in accordance with the federal regulations. So if it were an acute parameter, it has a 24-hour timeline to get that notice out. And it has to have certain means of telephone notification systems, broadcast on radio or TV. And if it's a non-acute parameter, then the concern would be you have up to a 30-day timeline to get that notice out. So it really depends on the risk of exposure, drives the timeline.
For clarifying that. My last question is, I understand that part of why, the reason, my husband was able to go to the EOWC's board meeting last week or the week before. It was really informative and helpful. And there was some mention about the level of VOCs being, essentially fine right now, in part because they're receiving water from the Newark interconnector. I don't know what the official name is, but I assume you know what I'm talking about. Was that water, because I understand that the interconnector was sealed for a lengthy period of time before the water was released into our water system, is that correct? No?
I don't think so.
Yes.
I mean, they weren't-
We're talking about the Holland Road connection.
A while ago, it hadn't been used, but it's been being used
Yeah.
for a while now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been used, I believe about almost two years now, 2 years, almost 2 years. It was opened, it was basically, it's a connection over at Holland Road near the Newark line. It was designed as an emergency interconnection when there was a shortage of water. When East Orange Water Commission realized that they couldn't supply sufficient water that was under the MCL without bringing in other water sources, they opened up the Holland Road interconnection and introduced Newark Water in the westerly side of South Orange.
Recently.
Over the past about 2 years.
Starting about 2 years ago.
So before that interconnector was opened up, was the water flushed or filtered in any way?
There are procedures. There are procedures for activating the interconnection.
Not you. Her, go ahead, say it again.
I was just asking, before the interconnector was opened up, was there some kind of protocol that involved special filtering or flushing that was followed?
The answer is flushing. There's prerequisites for establishing an interconnection. An emergency interconnection, you flush the waste, you detect background chlorine residuals. When you establish that, then it's acceptable to push the water through.
Okay. And since it was designed as an emergency interconnector, has there been any kind of modeling done to anticipate what the overall effect on South Orange water system is, having this significant source of water that was designed as an emergency injector become a mainstay source?
It's not a question of the mechanical pieces that are in place. It was simply a question of having a contract with the city of Newark, which they didn't, and which DEP cited them for because they were using a water source for which they didn't have a contract. Those were the problems that were associated with it. Theoretically, you could leave that connection open with a contract with the city of Newark, and there would be no problem with that.
It's not like, it's called an emergency connection, but the quality of the water is fine. It's not like it's from an emergency well where you would think, oh, is it tested enough? In fact, this is water that's flowing through the system all the time. And in the northeast part of the state, there's tons of interconnections between water systems that are on for a while, off, on all the time, so that it's not out of the ordinary.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Hi, Jonathan Glasser, Hillside Terrace, South Orange. I'm just curious whether tetrachloroethylene has the same density as water. And if it doesn't, whether it gets equally distributed to all of the homes in South Orange, or if some might get a higher percentage of it because of where they're located.
The answer to that is that as pure product, if you had, the density of PCE is such that it would sink. It's more dense. PCE is more dense. So if you had a container of water and you put a gallon in, then it would kind of glug to the bottom. Just like you can imagine that gasoline is lighter than water, so if you put in a gallon of gasoline in a bucket of water, it would lay on the top. So that's when you're talking product levels, though. When you're talking at the kinds of concentrations that we have here, which is the around 1 part per billion, and the mechanism that it gets in, there's not a density issue. It's totally dissolved in the water. So it's not at all that the lower parts of town would be suspect. That only makes a difference if you have a product, and we don't have a product. We have around 1 part per billion.
So you would expect it to be equally distributed
Exactly.
throughout all the homes, okay.
Yeah.
And if I wanted to try to be extra safe and use a filter, Is there something that you recommend?
No, there's nothing, we wouldn't be in a position to recommend it. Would I personally recommend a filter? Me, not so much. I mean, the thing, first of all, I wouldn't really recommend it, honestly, for several reasons. One, the levels are really, really low. So if you want it, but if you want it to get it down to even lower, I suppose you could, but there's unintended consequences. How do you know that you're not going to now have a spot where you might have a little breeding ground for bacteria in that kitchen sink area? So I personally wouldn't. And as a department, we don't have one that we would recommend or not recommend, and we wouldn't recommend it in this circumstance. But if you're still going to feel like you want to, I'd be personally very careful of it.
Well, I wasn't actually requesting a brand name, but more, well, you mentioned carbon before.
Right.
So you think a carbon filter would be most likely to remove these compounds?
Well, I think that it probably would. You would want to go and see what the manufacturer says that it'll treat, but it likely would. But then there's the other thing, you have to figure how long, when do you have to change it out, that kind of thing. Sort of like the filter in your, filter in my refrigerator has been in there for however long, you really got to stay up on that so that you don't have any unintended consequences. So, but carbon would probably do it. Personally wouldn't recommend it, but carbon would be something that you could look at.
Just one addition to that, there's, I think there's two agencies, Underwriters Laboratory maybe, and NSF, National Sanitation Foundation. They evaluate home treatment units for their intended purposes. So when they get their certification, they tell you what it's effective for and that it's rated for that removal of that contaminant or that product. So just look for those kind of certifications when you evaluate your home treatment units.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening. Brenda Brown, South Orange Avenue. I wanted to ask, one, I know you spoke about the cost for the treatment will be pretty pricey. How would that be handled in terms of, and it's probably in litigation, I'm not sure, but will the taxpayers or the recipients of the water be hit with the cost of the treatment, or will there be any federal funding that will kind of intercept to kind of mediate all of this?
That's really not a question for DEP and is something that's ongoing. Obviously, there are a variety of sources that East Orange Water Commission, it's their cost, will look to install these filters, the carbon filters that they're talking about right now. But we have a contract with the East Orange Water Commission that allows us to have water at given rates, and at least for the balance of that contract, that should not change. We have a variety of claims that we're making against them because they're trying to charge us for purchased water from Newark, and we are pursuing that still in the litigation, and it's our intention to recover those costs from East Orange Water Commission.
Okay, and the second question is, will there be long-term studies to see what the effect of the contamination would cause the residents who consume their water?
Say it again, long-term studies?
To see what the effects of consuming that water during the time of contamination would be to the citizens who consume that water.
Right. At this point, that wouldn't be something that would be necessitated by the kinds of levels that we have. The levels that we have here are anywhere from just a little below to just a little above the maximum contaminant level. Also remember that the federal allowable level is, I don't know if we mentioned this before, is 5 parts per billion. So, from a practical standpoint, you could be in Pennsylvania and be drinking up to 5, or be in New York and drinking up to 5. So the kinds of levels that we're seeing here are not something that we would look to do any studies on.
Okay, thank you.
Good Evening, Will McGarren from Conway Court in South Orange. You know, I'm not an expert in any of this. All I know is that for the 10 years that we've been here, we have not been able to drink the water. And, you know, it is a concern. I read some articles about the water in New Jersey. Has anybody done a correlation study between the incidence of Hodgkin's disease and leukemia and the areas that have elevated PCEs in their water?
Not that I know of. The Department of Health, the New Jersey Department of Health has done some epidemiological studies, but not on, to my knowledge, not on this contaminant. They've done it on benzene, and they've done it on what are called disinfectant byproducts, which are like chloroform and things like that. So I don't think that there's been any studies done.
Well, you know, I've sat here and I've listened to you all, and I don't feel any safer with the water. Quoting to me federal standards doesn't put me at ease, because the federal standards have been so lax and unenforceable over the last few years. I hope that coming here would give me a sense of comfort that the issue is being addressed and things will change, and if people have been harmed by this, that our elected officials would be the first to say that this has happened and have some form of redress. I don't know what more you can tell me. You tell me 5.5 parts and 1.1 part, and you know, all I know is that I change all my faucets twice a year from corrosion. It tastes funny, the water. The plumbers tell me that they sell more water softeners in South Orange than anywhere else in the state. You know, I mean, something's not right. You know, if there's an odor, if you smell smoke, there's fire. And something's not right, and I just don't feel like you guys are being forthcoming with this. That's just my personal opinion.
Right. Well, I mean, we are absolutely not hiding anything. The analytical, the data that's out there, there's data that's collected by them. The only real issue that they've had a problem with is the PCE, which, as we said, that they range from just a little bit above to a little bit below the MCL. I mean, if you're having water quality complaints that, I mean, for instance, their lead and copper values have been in line with what they're supposed to be. So, you know, if you really are having certain complaints, I would say, maybe give me a call tomorrow. It's possible that you're on a dead end and your mains need to be flushed. So there, you know, there's the chemical side of the water business, with PCE or bacteria, and there's also very much the physical, mechanical part that a water system needs to make sure that they take care of also. And so the example that I gave you, if you're at the end of a street, maybe the water doesn't turn over as much as it should, and maybe they need to be out there flushing some. So that's and that's something that might not be picked up in the specific sampling, but it's part of the good maintenance that they need to do. So we could talk about that more afterwards, and we could talk to both South Orange and East Orange about that.
And just another point, throughout this period, ever since we first understood that there was a problem, South Orange and I believe also DEP have each been doing their own independent testing of the water. We've hired a laboratory and we've taken samples periodically at odd times. At times when East Orange Water wasn't testing, we were testing, so that we could confirm indeed what the levels were. And I believe DEP has done similar independent testing.
That's true. We have for the volatile organic compounds, and we found through our rounds of testing that the levels are the same as they reported, a little below the MCL, a little bit above the MCL. But a person wouldn't notice from taste whether it was 1 part per billion PCE or 3 parts per billion PCE. So, but more the issues like you're saying sound like there may be more physical or mechanical things where flushing or something needs to be done. So you know, yes, we have done testing, but there's other things that need to be looked at if there's consumer complaints.
Anyone else?
Walkoff, South Orange. To address the lady's problem with the soft water and hard water, I wanted to say that I've just recently investigated and addressed this problem in my home. And yes, it's true, South Orange has always been known for having hard water, but I've had a soft water softener, a water softener, for at least 5 years, a new one, and it recently broke, which was very unexpected, meaning that the resin inside of it, which filtrates the water and makes it soft, that the resin had basically become inactive. It had like bubbled over or something. So the remedy is to replace the resin, which is a several $100 repair. But the problem is that I wasn't able to discover that this is what was going on with my water until several appliances had broken in my home. And they were all new within the last 5 years, but they had decomposed from all the sediment and lime or whatever it is in the hard water. So the soft water softener wasn't able to overcome the hard water, especially because I wasn't able to get any notice until it actually broke, and I realized that there might be some kind of a problem with the hard water. So, you know, the Jason and Company was my supplier, and they said it's actually happening all over the state, not just in South Orange. They said they never, I talked to a manager who said that in the first 20 years of his experience, he'd never had one break ever anywhere. And now in the last number of years, in various communities all over the state, he's finding that the soft water softeners are needing to be replaced with the resin. So his explanation, and this I guess is why I'm telling you this, because it's in part a question, I said, well, why is that happening? And so he said it was because various water systems, to overcome bacteria in their water supply, are infusing chlorine into their water, and they're doing it, I don't know, sort of willy-nilly, because there seems to be this feeling that no matter how much chlorine there is, it's not going to be harmful, or, you know, and they can infuse it in different levels at different times. You never know when they're going to do it. And because they're doing this, the hard water softeners are not really able to function properly, and it's very expensive. You know, I'm not concerned about physical harm or biological harm. I don't think that it's harmful from what I understand, but it is very expensive. And so I wonder if there's something that can be done about that.
Can I address that? You hit on a lot of good points. I just want to cover all of them. Chlorine residual. So I checked the chlorine residual data that comes into the department. That's a reporting requirement. And the ranges for South Orange are 0.5 to 0.7 milligrams per liter. That's the operational value that they're looking to get in their distribution system. The maximum contaminant level is a 4.0. So their operational range is less than 1, well within the boundaries of the proper dosage for chlorine.
And that's a very normal level to run in, what they're running at.
0.2 is above as the desirable mark. So they're hitting that mark, but they're staying below a maximum level. That's one point. Second point is the issue with home installations of water softeners. A common problem with that is the water softener unit goes on, and then there's no monitoring of how that's changing water quality. So a lot of times you'll take hard water and reduce it to extremely soft conditions, and that itself can create an aggressive water quality condition. And that could impact the plumbing in your home, the quality of piping. So you really have to have, once you install a unit like that, you want to have measures of testing to see what the hardness value is. In a lot of cases, you're adding sodium to the water. If you have a need for sodium-restricted diet, you have to be concerned about that. But a lot of people just install it and then they walk away and they're not paying attention to the changes in water quality that result from the installation of it, or they're cognizant of the O&M requirements, the operation and maintenance procedures, changing the resin. It has a certain shelf life. So all those things have to be evaluated when you install a unit. It's not just install it and then walk away.
Well, yeah, but the shelf life was like many, many, many years, and that's what this man was saying, experienced manager, that until now they've lasted 20 years before needing to be replaced, and now there's a much shorter life.
So if it's, okay, let's address that. So if the manufacturer is telling you that it's related to chlorine, then I guess the position we're saying here is that the chlorine residual is acceptable values.
Right, so
But you could install in a carbon filter before if you wanted to sustain your water softening unit, you install a carbon filter before the water softener, would strip out the chlorine, and then you just have the softening function unimpacted. But
Well,
these
I
are
don't know if
variables.
it's from chlorine, that was just what I was
Right.
told. I'm really asking
We
you.
hadn't,
what
we
would
hadn't
you
heard
think?
that.
You would need to have a good dialogue with the person who's making the recommendation for treatment in your home.
Right, but you don't know why hard water would be getting harder to treat? You haven't analyzed or heard about that?
I hear different scenarios of why they're failing in service. Sometimes it's the proximity to hot water tanks and pulling in hot water as well. A lot of it is just resin decomposition, just over time and over demand. They're under designed units. So really there's a lot of variables to make sure that what you have is the proper unit for your home.
Right.
Flow rate, are you using your irrigation water if that's what you do? All these variables have to be designed into your unit.
Okay.
And you could be exhausting it faster than you think.
Now, were you saying, though, that the hard water changes and it can become too soft?
That's right.
Is that what you're saying?
Yep.
Because I do have a kit now by which I can see if it's
That-
still
that's a good
hard, if
indicator.
it's still soft.
Right. And they do it in grains, I think. So 1 grain of hardness is equivalent to 17 parts per million of hardness.
Okay.
And if you're less than 50, you're getting into that soft range. If you get non-detect, you have very soft water and aggressive water quality condition.
Okay. All right, well, back to...
It's just food for thought.
All right, thank you. And back to the issue of East Orange Water Commission and the issue at hand. Is there any chance that the consumers, that the recipients of the water would have a cause of action to get a refund, a rebate, a reduction in water price or something like that based on the time period that East Orange Water wasn't providing what they said they would?
I'm not in a position to advise you as a customer of East Orange Water. I can tell you that the village has in its complaint, and that's a matter, I don't know if we put that online or not, but we have a complaint that seeks not only remedies with regard to water quality, but also with regard to economic concerns. We're seeking to recoup dollars that we believe they have charged us in excess of what they should have charged us based on a variety of claims that we have. And we're actively pursuing those things on behalf of the village.
Okay, that's good. And is there any way you could discuss in tonight's context why the rates in general of East Orange Water Company seem to have been, that we agreed to many moons ago, 20 years ago, like why they seem to be so much higher than other towns pay?
I don't believe they are. I think if you do a careful analysis, I don't think you're going to find that. I think you're going to find many communities where the rates are considerably higher.
Okay, well.
Pardon? Includes maintenance. Yeah, but by the way, it does include maintenance, but I think even aside from that, if you carefully look around the state, you're going to see a lot of communities where the rates are considerably higher.
All right, and I hadn't done an exhaustive research, but I had some other examples where the rates were considerably lower. But finally, who is now running the commission since the 2 head people have been indicted and aren't there anymore?
The municipal engineer in the city of East Orange has been named as the acting temporary executive in charge. And he has been actively participating in our meetings with the special master, and he appears, he's a sincere man, I believe, who's trying to do the right thing now.
Okay, good. All right, thank you.
Hi, Megan Berry, Harrison Court. Just a quick follow-up question. Does the East Orange Water Company use chloramines? No, just chlorine? So there's no ammonia that's used?
No.
Okay. And how often did you say you should test your water if you have a softening system?
It dependent on the unit and how it's designed, so it's really a question you have to ask for the vendor who's providing that unit.
Okay.
And it would be in a manufacturer's spec of how long the runtime is based on a volume that you would want to see if it needs servicing, maintenance, or testing.
Okay.
But after installation, when you think you're getting what you want, test the water quality for the basic parameters of pH, sodium, and hardness.
So a good purveyor of a water softening system will have some kind of kit that we can utilize ourselves to test it,
Yeah, if not, then you can get them, they're on the market.
like Home Depot or something.
Exactly, for home use.
We live at the end, as luck would have it, of a dead-end road, and so just to follow up on your point before, how often does that water need to be flushed, and how do we get in contact with you to take you up on your offer?
I can give you my number after the meeting. I can give you my number now. It's 609-292-5550. And I'll give you a card after the meeting, don't worry about it. And, you know, you could be on a dead end, but your line might be looped. You know, we can't tell from sitting here. So, you know, we recommend that water systems do yearly flushing. Do all of them do it? No. Do some do it more? Yes. You know, I'm not sure what the schedule is for the South Orange system.
Okay.
So,
And what's the process of oversight? Because you said that we still have well 17, is that right?
No, but they operate it. East Orange Water Commission manages that part of the system as well. When we entered the contract with them, it was management of the entire system, including well 17 and the air stripper that's on that well.
I'm really looking forward to the public meetings where we can review the best options going forward, because just from an organizational standpoint, this sounds so incredibly inefficient. It's kind of making my head explode. My experience is that the water here is much more expensive, and I was flat on my back sick after I moved here. I couldn't figure out what was going on with me. My kidneys were starting to fail, and I'm not saying this goes straight back to the VOCs. I'm just saying this is my experience of moving here, from being an energetic, healthy person to being really concerned about my health, and I stopped drinking the water, back to my old self again. So, you know, I understand that we're working within the realms of causation, not just correlation, but there's a lot of anecdotal evidence that as a community, we're going to have to find a way to pull it all together and reckon with it, I think. Thank you.
We can provide you with a copy of the contract if you would like.
I would love to see that.
That we definitely can do, so you can better understand the relationship between the parties.
I appreciate
Okay,
that.
and
Thank you.
you know, I'll meet with you afterward, and we'll exchange contact information. Anyone else?
My name's Joseph Kika. I live on 69 Ballast Street here in South Orange. And I'd like to thank both of you for coming in and addressing the concerns of the villagers here. Question one would be, if you have a contaminated well, to rectify it, do you actually flood a well, drain a well, or leave it as is and let it leach and then fix it on the back end before you pump? Could you give me an idea?
you know, if you have a contaminated well, it's not because something fell in the well. So merely just pumping the heck out of it for a short amount of time wouldn't work, because again, it's not like something fell in. What has happened is there's been some kind of
leaching
discharge,
right.
Either pipes, you know, of PCE from manufacturers, from businesses, from homeowners that used it over time. It ended up on the ground, in the ground, further down in the ground, gets in the groundwater, and now is slowly leaching out. And it can take years and decades before it completely leaches out, depending on how much happens.
So you let the well stay as is and then you fix it on the top end.
Exactly.
Okay, understand that. The other question is, you made a statistics that basically none of us would really be affected. But if you have people with low, let's say children, or people that have a low immune system, any studies on that?
The values, the risk assessment that's done is done over the course of a lifetime. So it's, first of all, it's typically not an immune thing. I mean, that tends to be something that we worry about with bacterial contamination.
Right.
You know, if you're very old or very young or immune compromised,
Right.
if there's microbial contamination of some kind, it becomes a problem, not really with these kinds of compounds. So the levels that were done, the studies that were done were not specifically directed at children. Some compounds that are thought to be potentially more susceptible, that children might be more susceptible to, those are singled out, but it was determined that it wasn't needed in this case.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Anyone else?
Good evening. For those of you I haven't met, I'm Barry Lewis, Village Administrator. Initially, thank you all for coming. A couple of quick reminders. Tonight's question and answer was videotaped. It's been streamed live on the website and on Soma TV, but for any of you here who maybe want to go back and listen to an answer again, if you couldn't take notes, or if you have neighbors or friends who are not able to make it, it will be on the website. It'll be accessible. You can watch the entire presentation again on the website. Again, a reminder, and Mr. Rother alluded to it, we are certainly encouraged by what we see as a new spirit of openness and cooperation by East Orange Water associated with the change in leadership, and we are very optimistic that that's going to be a positive sign. In the interim, though, any updates that we can, and we are, I think, a little bit more able now to communicate some things with the public, as Mr. Rother alluded to. We will make every effort. We will have things on the website. And certainly anything that is emergent in nature, we push out on the website through our emergency notification systems, through TV, any way we can do it. So I would encourage everybody, if you are not already, and we've been beating this with the hurricanes and everything else, please go on the website, register for our emergency notification system. You can get notifications via texts on your telephone, via Twitter, via email, via automated phone call, recorded phone calls. And that is the best tool that we have if there is an urgent need to notify somebody. As Mr. Buffet referenced, if there's a situation we've got to notify people within 24 hours, that's the tool that we have to do it. And we can only notify you if you're in the system. So I would encourage you, and again, encourage you to tell your neighbors, your friends, everybody. The more people we have registered, the more we can get the notice out. Lastly, I would just like to thank Karen Fell and Matt Buffet from DEP for taking time out of their busy schedules to come here, answer your questions. They are available. They are available to us. And certainly if you filter questions to us, we will get the answers and try and answer them and try and provide. One of the residents referenced transparency. We are hoping that people are seeing we're increasingly committed to transparency. And so we will try and answer any questions you have. If you leave here and you think of something you forgot to ask, feel free to get it to us. We will get the answers from either of them, or they'll get them from the people within their department that have the answers. So again, thank you all, and thank you to our guests.
I think Trustee Bauer has something she'd like to ask as well.
I asked a couple questions of Karen Fell and Mr. Maffei before no one from the audience asked them, so let me just make it clear. I asked a couple questions beforehand and no one from the audience asked them, so I'll just repeat it. I asked if there had been an investigation to determine the source, and Ms. Fell said, or actually Mr. Maffei said there had been an investigation, a source had not been determined. A follow-up question to that is, are there monitoring wells out there? In other words, is this a continuing investigation, or has it kind of been determined that you can't figure it out?
Site remediation program within DEP would have all that investigative information, so we'd have to circle back with you on where that is and how they're looking at this, or whether it's just viewed as global for this area and there is no real point source.
Okay, are there monitoring wells out there?
There could be on sites that are suspect, but I would have to get better information for you on that.
Okay, and is there a plume within the groundwater table that's contaminated, that's been delineated, do you know, or I'd have to look at the site remediation?
No, there isn't a specific plume. I mean, and in fact, if there were a very specific plume, then it would be much more likely that it would have been tracked back to the source. But in fact, there's very low and varying levels in all of the wells. So there's not a specific defined plume. And if there was, it would be better for predicting which wells to pump, not to pump. But in fact, they haven't had any luck with that.
Okay, well, that's a good segue to the second to last question, which was, I asked if there had been an evaluation or there was going to be an evaluation, as there usually is with the public water supply system, of the alternatives. You said you were going to be meeting with East Orange shortly, I think next week you said, to go over that. My question is, because there are so many wells, how do we know, or how do you know how many of those wells have to have a stripper put on them and so on and so forth? How are you going to make that judgment? And I guess just following up on a couple of the comments, how will we be able to sort of look through a window at the judgments that you may make and what factors go into that?
I will answer, but you look like you want to answer.
No, go ahead, and I'll add to it. Go.
Well, there's two draft reports that were prepared for East Orange that we were given a copy of. And the one speaks to things related to water quantity, and the other speaks to things related to water quality. And the one that speaks to water quality, you know, as reports typically do, ranges from do almost nothing to do everything. And so the report recommends to do some. And we're going to be meeting with them next week, and that's one of the things that we have to talk about, is that what are they planning on doing, and if their plan is to treat some of the wells, how are they going? I think that what their plan right now is to treat some of the wells sooner than later, you know, in the term probably like in the next 6 to 9 months, and then to treat additional wells after that, with a more permanent remedy. But we need to look and see if they can really guarantee that by only treating some of the wells, they're going to be able to keep the levels down, and that's been the dilemma all along. So it's not been determined yet how much treatment, how many of the wells have to be treated.
Okay.
And by the way, just to follow up on that, that has been a topic of discussion with the special master, where we are starting to draft a consent order that we're going to be able to enforce. And the discussion with the special master has been to await the input from DEP so that the recommendations that are coming from DEP will be incorporated in that consent order.
And I take it DEP's, the factors that will guide DEP in making the judgment about what they have to do in the shorter term and in the longer term is basically an engineering judgment.
Well, is it an engineering judgment? I think it's engineering. It's what can be done quickly. How much, how much do they know or about how the other wells are going to respond? Like one possibility is to turn this one well that hadn't been on and put treatment on, but is that going to move the this vaguely defined contamination around? So. I wouldn't say it's an engineering judgment. I think it's going to be more of a policy thing, because you can engineer just about anything, right? So it's going to be more of a policy decision of how can they ensure that the levels aren't going to exceed based upon what they're proposing. And as far as I know from some discussion, they are not coming in and saying this is the plan. They're coming in to discuss this is what we're leaning towards. Let's figure it out.
And Mr. Rother, you said in your introduction that you used the word immediate, and I was wondering what does immediate mean? Karen Feld just said 6 to 9 months.
Yeah.
So.
Immediate was, the way it was described to us and the special master was as soon as they can secure DEP approval, because they couldn't do it any quicker than that in any event. So that's the meaning of immediate.
Okay. Previously, I think I had asked you, do you think we can anticipate this by August 1st? I've kind of used August 1st as a marker, because when DEP first came down with the violation notice, they were required to remedy it on August 1st. I think that was August 1st 2 years ago. I don't remember now. It might have been even longer than that. Is August 1st a possibility?
You would have to, again, that's out of our control.
Where are we at now? We're in March. I think that we'll know more next week, definitely. March, April, May, June, July, August. You know, you could put treatment on then. We can work with them on certain approvals, and I don't think that will be the holdup. You know, but it will depend where and how they can install it, how much construction they have to do. So I guess it does get into engineering issues. So I don't know August 1st or not. I just, at this point, can't say.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Any other questions? If not, again, thank you both. We appreciate that. Well, oops.
My name is Matt Mathias. I live at 13 Scotland Road. I would like to make a comment. My ex-wife, Claudia Mathias, was a longtime resident of South Orange, and back in 2010, when this water issue became apparent to her, she also fell ill, and she started getting her water tested independently. She had contact with East Orange Water Reserve, and a lot of information. She did almost 3 years of research on this issue. She no longer lives in town, but I just want to let the residents know there's also a way to find out more information about this issue. And if you go to Facebook, it's South Orange Water Watch. And there's discussion, information, and questions that could be answered that couldn't be answered here tonight. I just wanted people to know South Orange Water Watch.
I just would also say one other thing. I give you my card. You can call myself. You can call Matt. You know, if you have follow-up questions, please feel free to give us a call.
There was just one question that I'm sorry, ma'am, I didn't get your name. Miss Bauer asked that kind of got lost in the mix, and that is, where's the window where interested members of the public, particularly customers of EOWC, can watch this process unfold? Is there stuff posted on your website? Do we have to keep calling you? Like, how does this work?
You know, we don't have any. We don't typically. We don't typically post this level of information on the website. There's certainly this situation is very out of the ordinary. We could look at, I think that you should communicate with us next week, and we can respond in writing to you with where things are at, and then you could post it on the South Orange website. That would be very possible.
I think we can help you in that regard, because as DEP settles these issues with East Orange Water, they're going to become topics before the special master, and as we learn them and they're resolved, and the special master allows us, you know, it's agreed, we'll put it on the website, as Barry Lewis indicated. You know, as things become finalized, we'll release them, we'll put them on the website.
That's great. Yeah, because I think the more raw data, the more primary sourced information that can circulate easily, you know, kind of the more the waters will calm, if you will, just personally.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, thank you again.
Sorry, I'm Maria Eberlein. I live on Church Street. Just to clarify, again, because I'm kind of new to this issue, are the water levels now, has there been a change since the level of PECs? Have they...
PCE, which is
PCEs, have they gone down?
The levels, no, the levels are remaining the same. You know,
they're remaining the same.
They're pretty much remaining the same. Sometimes when they sample, they're a little bit below the maximum contaminant level. Sometimes they're a little bit above, but they're all right around the same level.
And always have been.
And always have been.
Okay, so what I'm confused of is when did this become an alarming situation? Like, if they're still at the level they were when it became a problem?
Oh, I think that they're overall running a tad higher, a tad more often. You know, that they always used to be below 1 part per billion. Now we've required them to do increased sampling and present that information to us. So sometimes we get below the 1 part per billion, sometimes they get a little bit above it. So, you know, the department, South Orange, pressing on the issue, the department investigating more and requiring additional sampling, finding out that there was additional sampling that hadn't been turned into the department. Things like that have let us realize that there's slightly higher levels than had sometimes been reported there.
Okay.
So basically, that's it.
No, yeah, and it was the kinds of things that we discovered through the litigation that we brought to DEP's attention that really brought this to the fore and created an issue. You know, it might have sailed under the radar, but for the fact that the kinds of things that the two individuals who were indicted were doing, if we hadn't flushed those out and brought them to the fore, this might not have reached this level, and we might not have brought this kind of remedy to
So it's
the
not
water
that
condition.
the water was like
That's exactly.
contaminated and now it's gone down.
Yep.
It's- Okay, got it. Thank you.
Hi, Kelly Sullivan, 101 Vos Avenue. Mr. Rother, you very kindly offered a copy of the contract
Yes.
to this young lady. I
We'll-
wondered, would it be possible to put it
We'll
on
put
the
it
website?
on the website. We'll
Thank
put it
you.
on the website.
So my understanding is South Orange established its own water commission. Do we have our own water commission?
No.
Okay, so I thought we had our own water commission, that we
No.
hired someone in East Orange to manage it.
No, we own the water system. The village owns the pipes and the towers up on the hill and the reservoir on South Orange Avenue. All of those components of the water system we own. Years ago, before we contracted with East Orange Water Commission, we had a department within the municipality that ran that as a water utility here within the village. We still own that. It's just that it's managed by East Orange Water Commission, who also supplies the water.
Is there any liability on the part of South Orange as we're going through this process? I know you can't talk about the litigation, but I'm just curious, does South Orange have any liability in the outcome of what that litigation is?
To East Orange Water Commission?
No, to just in terms of the taxpayers here in South Orange. Are there any
I'm not in a
liabilities?
position to venture that sort of opinion.
David Rubin, Scotland Road. Could you just briefly explain what conditions or what level would the DEP come in and take enforcement action? Why the village has to take enforcement action? What would trigger a DEP action on this?
We're not taking enforcement action.
But that's why I'm asking. What would trigger an enforcement action as opposed to the village having to sue East Orange Water?
Right, the department has taken several enforcement actions. Not to get into any of the details, but the department's issued a number of orders, including penalties. So the department has taken enforcement actions on it.
Over how long a period, or just recently? Or?
I think the first one goes back a year and a half ago.
So that's gone through this litigation, the start of the litigation and the negotiations?
Well, these things happen concurrently.
Okay.
Yeah. It was that, South Orange approached us about levels, and we started taking a closer look and going in and looking through the books and eventually putting them on increased monitoring, and that's how it all evolved.
Is there any fines that might be levied on them from the state perspective?
I believe that the last, I think that all of the orders had penalties, but I'm not positive, but I know that the last order that went out had a penalty, I think, in the ballpark of like $402,000 against East Orange.
Yeah. And I'm just curious, how does that compare to like other water purveyors that may have had similar situations like that?
Well, this doesn't happen very often. So I would say, in general, we have the water professionals in New Jersey are very proactive. It doesn't happen very often that we have a situation like this.
And you mentioned, Mr. Ryder, a report. Is this East Orange's consultant that prepared this report you referred to?
There are several reports, yes.
Okay.
And they've been shared with us and with DEP.
Thank you.
Sorry. I know everybody wants to go home. I didn't realize that no source had been identified for the VOCs, for the PERC in particular. And
Good.
And is there going to be some kind of protocol that involves more frequent testing followed until a source is identified? Because that actually makes me feel less at ease.
Well, the issue is, or the response to that is that we're going to address the problem by having treatment put on.
Sure.
So whether the source is found or not found, treatment's going to be put on and the levels are going to be brought down to a non-detectable level. The benefit of finding the source, like if you could find the original source of contamination, whatever company or companies or individuals discharge that material, the benefit of that might be that it might be possible to put in some groundwater pump and treat, some kind of remediation right there. But the way that this contamination tends to go, treatment would still need to be put on at the public wells. So the other thing is that there's no lack of sources for PCE because it was so commonly used and even still is commonly used. Sure. So, but we do need. I honestly, I don't have at my fingertips the history of any investigations that were done. So that's one of the things that's on my notes to follow up with and get a clear response from our site remediation program on that. Not that they were unwilling to be clear, I just don't know offhand.
Sure, okay. I mean, because from the notes from the board meeting, I haven't seen the proposals that you've seen, but I understand that there were 3 different proposals generated by the consultants, one that involved 2 GACs, one that involved 3 GACs, which are these high-powered carbon filters. And my understanding is that the GACs filter 99% of the VOCs, is that correct?
Yeah, that's probably correct.
Yeah, and so my understanding is that the board was leaning, and then the air strippers, and that the 3 GACs would cost $1.4 million. And I have the timeline at home that showed that it could be implemented anywhere from 3 to 11 months from now, depending on how much customization, and back and forth it takes. And that the board of the EOWC liked the 3 GAC proposal because they could afford that right now. But as a long-term solution, they were looking toward raising money for the air strippers. And so the GACs will last 3 years? Or how long will the GACs
I think the GACs last a long time. The issue is that carbon, whether it's a permanent or a portable station, the carbon has to be changed out. But there's cost, even with air strippers, there's cost, energy costs. So, it's a balancing act.
So I think that sounds like a great option myself, because I know that the GACs, not only what the air strippers...
well, if I could just interrupt you. It's not really, in my opinion, it's not really a matter of is GAC better than air stripper, because they're both really good and either one would work.
Sure.
I think that the bigger question is it okay just to put it on 3 of the wells when you've got 17 wells that have levels?
Right.
Why wouldn't we push to have treatment put on all, I forget if the number, 17, 15, 18, whatever the number is. So that's the big ticket item, is it just 3 or is it many? And they have not yet come in with an explanation of why just putting it on 3 will guarantee that the levels will stay below the MCL in the water. And that's the issue. So GAC stripper, whatever, that's it's something that the engineers can work out and figure between energy costs and changing out the carbon and all, whichever is cheaper. But the real issue is how many wells are they going to have to treat?
I know nothing about this. I'm trying to learn, but I had that question as a layman, so I'm glad you're going to look into that. But just kind of, that's exactly where I was going with this question. One assumes that if there are, 10 wells that are above 1.0, or how many?
I think that there's like around 18 wells and that have levels at different times. Sometimes they're a little above, sometimes they're a little below.
So you're not going to get a filtering system on every single well?
Well, the proposal that was done by, I've only seen a draft, but I'm sure it's a very robust draft. You could either treat at each well or The wells are in well fields, so there's several wells here, several wells here, several wells here. So you could design a unit that treated all the water from this field, and all the water from this field, and all the water from this field. Or you could just let it all roll to the treatment plant and treat in just one spot. So if you let it all, if you just treat it at the treatment plant, well, that's, you might be treating more water than you absolutely need to, and that's additional costs for carbon or for energy or whatever. So maybe just some of the well fields can be treated. So, you know, they go through the whole gauntlet of possibilities.
So you're not concerned about the fact that no source of contamination has been identified?
No, I'm not really, no, I'm not really concerned about it, and this is why. Because the level of, that we've seen in the wells, carbon or air stripper should be able to handle them.
Okay, well, thank you.
So.
Okay, and once again, thank you. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.